It is time for the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. Mike, how are you today?
I'm wondering, did you notice, Brian, that I have a new coffee silo?
I just noticed that now.
This thing is bigger than ever before, and it says it'll keep it hot for 8 hours.
For 8 hours?
I'm telling you.
That is one.
That's a coffee silo.
Hellacious silo.
I'm pretty impressed. Listen, folks, we've got Ludwig von Wiedendorsky and Miles Bauer, my co-host, with us this morning. We've got a full plate because there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. But before we dive into it, Miles, you do a lot of air travel. Is that correct?
I have been known to do so, yes.
Listen, I got to tell you, folks, I got to whine and complain for a minute. I went away on business this weekend for Renegade River. I flew out to Connecticut. Listen, I remember going back and forth back in the 70s, Miles, and I really used to look forward to air travel. And I don't know how else to say this, but for all those folks that think we're winning this war, I got to tell you, the amount of freedom and that we've traded for nonsense is insane to me. It just is. Miles and Ludwig, you're probably not old enough, but I know Miles and I are the two grumpy old guys here. You remember, Miles, when you would take somebody to the airport or someone would take you to the airport and they could walk out to the gate with you? You may stop at a little cafe or a bar on the path, and it was an event to go to the airport. It was fun. And man, I don't think the TSA people, and it's not that they're individually bad, it's insanity, to use that word, the way we're doing this nowadays. It's like poor service is built into the process. It's like they purposely are saying, how ugly can we make this process for you? And by the way, you owe us a lot of money. Am I just being overtly over-the-top negative on this, or what?
Well, yeah, I mean, it has substantially gone up, but remember, it wasn't that long ago. I think it was summer of last year that they cut back on the TSA personnel at O'Hare and made the lines even longer. And then they attributed it all to the Republicans not passing budget money. So they had to cut back on the TSA, and people spent hours just trying to get through the TSA alone.
I got to tell you, the problem that I'm having with the TSA is, frankly, other than checking out toothpaste, they're not saving lives. I tried to Google last night in preparation for me whining about this topic. I tried to find instances of them actually stopping something, and instead I found more instances of them being tested and failing. So, are one of you guys outside? I'm hearing a lot of wind.
No, I am not.
Okay.
No.
Okay, just a lot of background, guys. Anyhow, I don't... Ludwig, do you do any flying?
Yeah, I've flown quite a bit, and I do remember the days when you at least went through a metal detector. Everybody could,
Yeah.
Well, you go out to right out to the plane. I remember walking out of the tarmac with my mom to drop me and my brother off to fly to Indiana on our own, and she walked us right onto the plane and walked right back off and waved us on. And
I don't know what we're getting out of this, and I know the folks that disagree with me are passionate about it. They must be, because we taxpayers, the folks that work, are paying for this nightmare. And like I say, it's built-in poor service. It's designed to be a rotten experience. And irony being what is, the larger I've gotten in my older age, the smaller the chairs have gotten. And so yesterday I'm sitting in the airport waiting for my flight at 10 minutes to 4 a.m. So I had a great day. By the time I actually walked through the doors at Renegade River yesterday, it was 2:30, and that's insane to me. It truly is crazy. Not their process, but that we as a society are willing to say, fine, that makes sense, because it doesn't make sense and it's not saving lives.
Well, and you only save like maybe 2 hours over driving that, Mike. I mean, by the time you put in the time of getting there early, your layovers, boarding, unloading, picking up your baggage, getting your rental car, getting to the you probably saved yourself 2 hours. Have a much larger headache.
There was a fellow. It's funny that you say that because it was one of the points I wanted to raise while we kick this thing. But and listen, folks, we've got a lot bigger topics on the plate. I just had to get into this. That just makes no sense to me that as a society, I see millions and millions of people, and they're all herded like mindless cattle. Big gigantic lines waiting for the Dunkin' Donut coffee, or big gigantic lines waiting for everything. And so when I'm complaining about that yesterday at the shop, one of the younger folks are standing there going, well, what did it used to be like? Because they don't know. Ludwig, I think that's you. You've got some terrible background noise.
See what I can do here.
Yeah, you got to do something. It's overwhelming the noise. There you go. Whatever you did is better. But
Mike,
go ahead.
I would say one thing. Remember how we got here? It was the knee-jerk panic reaction right after 9/11.
Yep.
Where we all just went nuts and we said, forget our freedoms, we just want to be safe, and this is how we arrived here. I mean, it has gotten so stupid to the point, if I want to pay a couple $100, I can get TSA pre-approved.
Right.
So how does that make you safe that I shelled out a couple $100 to bypass some of the security measures?
Whenever we deal with government, we are not dealing with logic anymore. We are always dealing with Treasury, always. This inevitably is always, always, always about funding. And folks, I'm telling you, it ain't saving nobody. To say that I can have my shampoo if it's under, you just go, really? This is what you're doing that's going to keep me safe? They threw out my shaving cream. And listen, it's $1.50. I don't care. But it wasn't going to do anything. To me, it's perplexing, honest, that we think that this is such a great idea. We keep electing the morons that support this with their votes. It's off the rails. It's not fun. There's what I started to talk about earlier. There's another shop somewhere in the North Grand Rapids area, and this fellow decided to drive. So it goes to your point, Ludwig. I beat him. My travel time was less than 2 hours. In fact, it was just over an hour. Now, I don't know what he paid. And I thought, well, the weather, et cetera, et cetera. But I did a whole bunch of sitting and doing nothing in very cramped quarters where I just don't fit. I got felt up. I got scanned. I'm going, really? This is the jet set age. This is what it's all about, huh? I think we need a big old smack on top of our forehead, we taxpayers.
Well, it's funny. We flew to Vegas and Disneyland this year with the kids. It was the first time they've ever flown. Yep. And all I found myself the whole time doing was going, guys, it didn't used to be this way. We used to be able to do this. You didn't used to have to do this. You could do this before. And they didn't know any different, so they thought it was cool to get on an airplane. But I kept explaining to them, every step we were going through here is because of the things that we're giving up for freedom. So they understood. Listen,
they're not doing this in Israel. I'm just saying, they're not doing this. They're not saying, look, it's a 71-year-old nun. We should corral her and run her twice through the machine and feel her up. They're not doing that stuff in Israel. We're doing it because we're stupid. I don't know how else to say it. We're dumb to allow this to happen. It goes to Miles's point, though, so hang on for a second. Miles's point was spot on. This was a knee-jerk reaction, but at some point as a society, we should look back from that knee-jerk reaction and acknowledge this is costing us literally billions, in the hundreds of billions, by the way, folks, per year. It's doing nothing but ruining our daily lives if you're trying to go visit family, if you're doing business. And it's costing all business more money. So it's showing up in costs of ways that you couldn't even begin to project. You just can't imagine the cost to our society for nonsense that achieves nothing. That's what I'm saying. On a bright note, because we've only got just a few seconds left, I met this guy that sold me billions and billions of dollars of firearms. He's not near as bad as his reputation would suggest. So, Dan Krupa, thank you very much. And I haven't seen the bill, but I hope you saved me a lot of money to warrant that miserable trip. I'm just saying. It was terrible. Gee, I don't ever want to do that again. I think I'd rather walk than go through the TSA process. Stand in line here, stand in line there, etc. Brian, how long do we got? He says, I'm done. Folks, we'll be right back, and we'll jump into some more serious issues.
RenegadeRiver.com is new and used firearms, all priced to sell, plus ammo, reloading supplies, optics, clothing, lasers, and yes, tactical gear. RenegadeRiver.com, family owned right here in Michigan, because you deserve it.
And this is the Mike Hewitt Show, a service of RenegadeRiver.com.
Listen, folks, if you're just tuning in, we've got Ludwig von Wiedendorsky and Miles Bauer, my co-hosts. And boys, let's talk about the Obama farewell that I'm going to guess is a long ways from over, even though it was kind of long. How long did you say it was, Miles?
It was something like 75 minutes, or it was, I was reading an article today. If you combine the time that it took W to say goodbye, Reagan to say goodbye, and Clinton to say goodbye, Obama would still have 10 more minutes to speak.
I wonder if you added up all the times those three presidents referred to themselves, if it would come close to his 75 times of self-mention.
Yep.
And by the way, he ain't going away. He can say farewell, but this is not, or futile. He's not leaving. He's still not. He's not going to get off the stage. There's a lot of precedences that this fella has delivered to the arena in things like, and we'll get into it in the next session, but with Sessions' nomination hearings where you've got a Democrat senator that's going to be testifying against him today. These things are unprecedented, and they're dangerous for our republic. He said democracy throughout it. He must have said democracy 1,000 times. I should have counted, except for I couldn't force myself to stay that tuned in. This is a republic, folks, and I'm not trying to be partisan. It is a small r, not Republican Party. It is a small r Republican form of government, and if you do not believe me, you need only to Google it or get out your handy-dandy U.S. Constitution. It ain't a democracy. That's France. Welcome to France. Well, I don't want to be French. That's why I slept through that class, Miles. I'm just saying. I don't want to be Francais. Xavier, not count me out. The point is when a guy says, I'm leaving you a $20 trillion debt, aren't I wonderful? And the folks applaud like penguins, you got to go, really? Oh, I don't see the upside to that. Am I missing something, guys?
Yeah, the overall impression, and hating to be a grumpy old guy, but the overall impression I got last night was that
haters gotta hate, Miles.
I equated it to putting lipstick on a pig.
Start calling you Sarah Palin.
Yeah.
Listen, I made it to almost the end. I didn't get to see the final I'm wonderful, gotta go, but I'm not
and
leaving.
I even had to shame you to do that.
I really wasn't going to do it. I'm telling you, folks, and what he said is true, folks. I was going to watch the History Channel. I can't stomach anymore of that self-congratulation Marxist rhetoric. I just can't. I don't support the ideology. Our Constitution doesn't support the ideology. I've just had enough of them. Au revoir. Get off the stage. Adios. But he's not going to. And you're right. You did shame me into it for show prep. Oh,
yeah, but
that was hard,
I will say
folks.
this. I always felt necessary, because I respect the office of the presidency, whether I liked him or not, to listen to what the president says.
Yep.
And
good point.
like I said last night, at this point, I no longer ever feel that responsibility to tune in and listen to that clown again.
Well, you've got till the 20th. Until then, he's your clown.
I know.
You can listen on my behalf. Thank you.
But as of that date, I never care what he says again. His whatever he says doesn't matter anymore.
Tell me something. One of the things that he talked about in there was that he's, and by the way, some of his words, all jokes aside, folks, some of his pleasantries were pleasant. they just ring hollow after having watched him in the arena for 8 years. But one of the things that specifically caught my attention was his gesture looking forward about how he's seeking an easy transition, because that's one of the American ideals. And GW made it easy transition, and now he wants to do it for Trump. And folks, I don't know how to say this about our president, but that's a bold-faced lie, because they're doing the exact opposite of that. That's exactly why they've called on their Democrat to testify against Sessions, which has never, ever, ever happened before. It's not like it didn't happen very often. It's never happened before. There's a lot of never happened befores. And so that he can stand there and folks applaud when he says he's seeking an easy transition, he isn't. It's a bold-faced lie. It's not like we have a difference in opinion. It ain't true. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I was going to say he would have a hard time convincing Israel of that.
Imagine what the left has, they said all the way through GW's term, and now they say it looking forward for Trump. What do our allies think? Yeah, I think I like that question. What do our allies think after watching this for 8 years, where we've sided with most of our enemies? We sent Winston Churchill's bust back to him and said, "Bag it, we don't need you." Where does that ideology come from that we're embracing things like Palestine over Israel? And I see it all over Facebook and everywhere else where they're saying, yeah, but the Israelis did this, and talk about some anti-Semitism. Oh, my goodness. It's crazy.
Yeah, but I think, though, Mike, I think you and I, and we detailed it a little bit, since they lost the election,
yep,
they have absolutely lost their mind. I don't ever remember a time where I saw the Democrats as a whole, as a party, just completely hopscotch from one excuse to another, go absolutely berserk and fight reality as much as they have since the election.
You're probably right. And, the only thing I can compare it to was, frankly, my own reaction to President Obama's victory in the first place. And listen, in fact, you and I exchanged texts then, and I think you responded in Russian. I had to translate it on Google.
Yeah.
But listen, I wasn't teary-eyed. I wasn't out on the warpath. I wasn't breaking into the chambers of a hearing trying to be disruptive. I didn't burn nobody's buildings. I didn't kill anybody. What I did do, folks, and I've talked about this on the air before, I was right in the middle of writing America's Final Beginning, and that had a set date, still has a set date of 2029. And I thought, oh boy, I wonder if my schedule's off. I paused the writing it for about 6 months. Other than that, and by the way, that was only for me trying to stay on a timeline that made sense, just so I could grapple with what did his victory mean. But beyond the literary side of it, my head didn't flip off my shoulders like we're watching now. Ludwig, did yours?
Yeah,
it did.
This whole thing is. Yes, last night was insane.
I don't know what that meant just now. What'd you say?
It's just this whole thing's been insane with.
Oh, insane.
What's that?
I'm teasing you. Never mind. He's reminded me of that time when I said, what caused the Titanic to sink? And you said that was a 7-1 vote of Flint City Council. And I went, what? That's what when we do a best of show, we'll have to put one together one of the days. That's got to make the best of times. I'm just saying. Oh. Miles, did your head flip off your shoulders and you wigged out 2008 when he won?
Yeah, no,
How many government buildings did you picket?
Yeah, I was gonna say I got to burn a few buildings down here in Chicago. No, I had this thing called work I had to head off to. So
I remember sitting in the bar in Battle Creek with my team owner.
You went to drinking. It may cause you to go drinking.
It made my team owner start drinking, and he started getting really loud and vocal. And there was an Obama victory party upstairs.
So
you know what I'm talking about.
The owner of your club was very excited. Then is what you're saying?
No, quite the opposite. And I thought for sure we weren't walking out alive.
Yeah, it's to me, we're pretty polarized, but in fact, one of the things I want to make sure we touch on today is the amount of hate stares that I've gotten on my trip to Connecticut and back. And I'm talking about racial relations. That was flabbergasting to me. And I grew up in Pontiac. Where the mix of folks was pretty even. I've never seen the stares and the animosity in the races that I've witnessed just since Trump's win, by the way. And I don't think that I think we'd be remiss to not touch on that.
But you know what, Mike?
What's that?
If you go back to 2008,
yeah.
Remember, that was what Madam Never Trumper always emphasized is, we have to elect him because this is going to completely take care of all of the racial ills that have faced America since God invented dirt.
Miles, hang on. Hang that thought right there. When we come back, we'll pick up right with Madam Never Trumper. Folks, we'll be right back.
You're listening to the Mike Hewitt Show.
Renegade River, guns and ammo, and so much more. Old-fashioned service with surprisingly low prices. On M104 at the top of the new 231 bypass in Utica. Or find us at renegaderiver.com because you deserve it.
The Mike Hewitt Show is brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. We're already into the third segment.
And we are into it, folks. Listen, if you're just dialing in, we've got Ludwig von Wiedenhoeft and Miles Bauer, my co-hosts. And I want to talk this segment, if I can, about the Sessions nomination process or the hearings that are going on. But I want to start out that dialogue. Well, before I do it, Miles, I cut you off before the end of the other segment. What was Never Trumper saying about 2008?
So back in the mist of time.
Way back
before
back in the time.
She was my lovely bride, before she was Madam Never Trumper,
yep.
she was an Obama zombie.
Okay.
And she kept running around the place saying, if we elect him, this is going to help race relations, and the birds will lie down with the bees, and Bambi will be able to cross the highway and all this. And I would just roll my eyes and go, no.
Right here, Pat. Right here.
And here we are 8 years later, and I would argue race relations are probably the worst that they've been
since the 60s.
I can remember back in the 60s.
Yeah, since the 60s. Listen, I got to tell you, though, in her defense, I obviously was not a proponent of President Obama's victory. I didn't vote for him. I don't support him. I reject most of his ideology flatly. Having said that, when he won, I stepped back and thought, well, okay, good for you. And America and our Constitution is strong enough. We can do this. And maybe, to her point, not so much about Bambi crossing I-75, but I thought maybe, to her point, we could finally have some normalcy in race relations. And what I touched on in the last segment that brought this up was my trip to Connecticut. I went through Charlotte, North Carolina, because somehow the geniuses that are in control of the flight panels think that's on the way to Hartford, Connecticut. By the way, it isn't, folks. And if you do the math, it's almost the same distance from Grand Rapids to Charlotte, North Carolina, as it would have been just to fly straight, but that's for another show. One thing I found, though, and I don't want to paint with a big brush here, not everybody. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not wanting to be shrill. I'm not wanting to exaggerate. But vastly more than I'm used to and way more overt than I've seen in my life. I'm almost 56. Passing black folks specifically, but not just black folks, ethnic in general. There is so much angst that, I would get really grimaced, dirty looks. Now, if you looked at me, the joke was I'm Santa Claus or Captain Smith from the Titanic. I think I'd rather Santa Claus of those two comparisons. But listen, I'm just an old man walking down the aisle, but I'm white. And that's not what I don't think that your bride and I back then wanted this to be the result of his presidency. But listen, I can't help but think this is what he wanted, because the actions and the words that he embarked on have caused it. And we've heard all of the examples, so I don't want to make a segment out of it, but when the young black man was shot, that could have been his son, but none of the police officers, very few of them got any kind of attention. None of them that I'm aware of got a presidential White House visit. He didn't acknowledge them on television. These things all lead to a directive that causes folks to react a certain way. I think it's fairly predictable. Therefore, I've got to say he did it on purpose. It had to be. I can't find no other rationale for it, because at some point during 8 years, even if I'm wrong, and I want to be wrong, but if that wasn't the direction he was trying to take, just like I talked about the TSA, at some point you pause and say, okay, the path that I'm on isn't the right one. If he wanted happier, more positive race relations, he should have paused and said, what I'm doing is causing the opposite effect. Maybe I better change course. He never did. In 8 years of people talking about this, therefore you can only conclude he did it on purpose. To say that,
because it buttresses, what the Democrats are pursuing these days, which is identity politics.
Yeah, which I got to tell you, I think is the most racist politics that we have seen since the Civil War, and I mean that passionately. I was at a gathering for a Republican gathering, but it was a grassroots. It was not the Republican Party. It wasn't led by electeds. Frankly, I'm the one that led it. But in the course of that meeting, there was a Hispanic guy there. He's very Republican. He's a very, very nice man. And he was talking about the heat that he takes in the Hispanic community for being conservative. And so we had a brief conversation, him and I, in the midst of a group of people. It was like a fairly well-attended round circle. We could have been singing. If you just glance through the window, you'd probably think we were all singing Kumbaya. But it was a big round circle of people. And in that conversation, I said, listen, I oppose either party, Democratic or Republican Party. I passionately oppose ethnic outreach, because I think the word liberty and constitutional rights, I think all of those things belong to anybody who wants to embrace liberty. Not this group or that group or those people or these people. I think that when the parties, either of them, get into ethnic identity, it is by its nature racism, and I reject it passionately. But of course, to your point, Miles, that's what we've witnessed for 8 years, and I think the outcome was predictable, and it's what I talked about with me being glared at, and I just found that fascinating, sadly fascinating. So what do you think? What does she think now, by the way?
She's, being a never Trumper, one of her things is she's all for identity politics. One of our recent discussions was she wanted more diversity across Trump's cabinet. And obviously I was arguing about, let's just get the best qualified person regardless.
I think our society as a whole is lesser. Their reward for their payment in taxes is caused to be of lower value when we seek to plug people in because they're the right identity rather than the best people for the job. I passionately believe that. I think, by the way, when we say we need a white person, that's wrong. But when we say we need a person of color, a person of this, a person of that, no to all of those things. I'm not in preference to any group, white, black, any of them. And I think it's racism to say we need to have a more. Let me give you an example. You go to a Democratic meeting and there's an overwhelmingly large percentage of black folks. It's their right, by the way, and I support them to be there. And then you'll hear the talking heads on TV point at the Republican Party or groups of conservative people and say, look, they don't have a lot of black people. But when you do the math, guess what? I've done the math. I've literally sat and did a head count with my iPhone calculator in my hand. I'm looking around the room, and the math is representative of the culture. Isn't that the way it's supposed to be, or am I just all wet here?
I can tell you this, that I had to teach this subject and diversity and affirmative action, all that. And what you find out is when the students understand really what is happening here, like you're saying, they don't like it. When they find out that it takes a lesser score for a black female to become a state trooper than a white male.
It's insulting to the black folks.
Exactly. And they openly say, I don't like that. That makes me feel I'm not qualified. They said, that's the problem. They're setting you up for failure.
Right.
By putting you in there based on what you look like rather than your skill set, sets you up for failure. And that's the problem we have. Is somebody gets in a position they shouldn't be in because they look a certain way.
Yep.
They don't do well, and that now sets the precedent for everybody else looking, well, that last person didn't do well. How are you going to do well?
To me, liking a person or disliking a person based on who they were born as is the epitome of ignorance. It just is. It's the epitome, picture definition of ignorance. I don't believe in the concept of protected classes in a society that's supposed to be liberty-orientated and free in a constitutional republic. Those concepts don't work together, and multiculturalism in its overview is designed to cause segregation. I know folks are throwing stuff at the radio right now, but it's true. Just do the math. By the very nature of what it is, it seeks segregation. I reject that passionately. That's my view.
I'm so naive in this area of things that my last pro hockey job as a coach, I coached a team. We had 3 black guys on it, an Indian, a fat guy. I told everybody this. I said, my 3 black guys all scored a goal in the game.
Yep.
It's the first time in history 3 black hockey players have scored a goal in a professional hockey game. I lost the score sheet because I didn't even realize it was a big deal. Like, I didn't think, wow, my 3 black guys scored goals in the game. I wonder if that's something. I did. I just saw it as Harvey and Levy and G-Baby scored goals.
Listen. I got to stop you because we're on a break, and when we come back, let's make the Enigma today talk about blackmail Trump from Russia. Folks, we'll be right back.
RenegadeRiver.com is new and used firearms, all priced to sell, plus ammo, reloading supplies, optics, clothing, lasers, and yes, tactical gear. RenegadeRiver.com, family owned right here in Michigan, because you deserve it.
The Mike Hewitt Show is brought to you by RenegadeRiver.com. And we've turned that corner once again. It is time for the Enigma Report.
You know, I'm reading all over the news everywhere that Russia has compromising material on Trump. Well, Russia says we don't have compromising material. Trump says that's nonsense. And I pause, I go, well, and I always use this test. Folks that listen to the show know that I like the word why. So I pause and I say, why would somebody, I don't know who somebody is yet, maybe we can ferret that out during this segment, but why would somebody suggest that Russia has compromising? And when I put that question up against that issue up against the question why, I think there's some folks that would like to make it look as if Trump is placing America in a position of being blackmailed by the Russians. Miles, is that your take on this?
Well, I mean that is certainly plausible. I think this is just the continuation of them coming up with any other rationalization of the reason why they lost the election and all their state houses they've lost and governorships they've lost and Congress seats that they've lost, other than, you know, it was their own party.
I look at the things that are coming out of the left, and I candidly, I don't understand them. And let me give you an example to that. Through the nomination processes under President Obama or under President Clinton or under President Carter, that's our window of time, do you recall any right-wing organized groups pushing their way into the Senate hearing room and chanting to the point where folks couldn't hear? Do you recall that?
No.
I tried to find examples of it. I couldn't find anywhere coming from Carter forward, and I didn't look any further backwards than that, but I didn't find any of the right-wing groups, whether they were really right-wing or what the left identifies as right-wing. I could find no examples of our ideology busting into a Senate nominating process or a Senate nomination hearing. Not one example. So I watched Code Pink yesterday, and I heard a number of different talk show hosts ask this question, and I'm asking the same question. You don't just walk in to that chamber. You have to get a pass to get access to that area, which begs the question, which Democratic senator is passing out passes to these people that are purposely trying to disrupt our constitutional process. I mean, they're not aiding it, and they've got folks that they've elected that are there to beat Sessions up with appropriate questions. Why can't folks just leave it as the process? I never understand these things. That's maybe why we don't see a lot from the right. We have a process in place that allows for public engagement. It's called votes. It's called all kinds of things, but it's not called what I consider to be unlawful disruption of a Senate hearing. Am I being too right wing?
I would put forth a theory. I think that when Harry Reid invoked the nuclear option a couple years ago,
Dingy Harry, not to be mixed up with Dirty Harry, because
right.
Dirty Harry had guns. Wait, Dingy Harry owns guns also. I'm sorry, I'll stop.
And I think when he invoked the nuclear option, which means they only needed a simple majority, that has now come back and bit them to the point where they have virtually no say other than to just grandstand because
right.
they've shot themselves.
But listen, I've got to believe that the average U.S. citizen, Democrat or Republican, maybe I'm all wet here, I don't know, but maybe my premise is flawed, but I think the average citizen looks at what Code Pink does and is repulsed or at least repelled by it. I'm not politically moved by it. I think it's nonsense and get them out. Where are the handcuffs? That's my interpretation. I say that way because if they're using these things to try to move their electorate, I don't know how that would work. Does it work? Is Trump or is your bride? Is she's not moved by these types of shenanigans, is she?
No, but you could certainly make the argument that at least half the country voted for Hillary. So,
yep.
You could say there's probably a percentage of those voters that are probably cheering at the television set.
I know, but listen, if they really wanted to uncover some wrongdoing or some questionable verbiage from 30 years ago, if they really wanted to get to the truth of who Senator Sessions is, you would think that they'd stand down, keep their mouth shut, or maybe email questions to their representatives to have included. That would be, to me, the reasonable and logical approach to it, is to take part in the system rather than trying to disrupt the system. It's a great system, folks. It really is. It's supposed to work when we let it. So I guess you're probably right, Miles. They're trying to appeal to, 4, 5, or 6% of the left excited by these type of things. The average person that I know, the average Democrat that I know in my family or my circle of friends, they're not clapping with excitement over this. They're probably, I don't want to say they're embarrassed, but I don't think they're moved intellectually by the shenanigans of Code Pink and other such groups, or like the nitwits that were paid to go disrupt Trump rallies. If that moved any needle at all, it caused the right that was fractured to coalesce. I mean, if it had any impact at all, I don't understand it. That's just my naivete. To me, it is as misguided as trying to divide the United States in Russia. And by the way, the difference between the Democratic Party when they used to embrace Russia and the Democratic Party now that attacks Russia is the ideological shift within the country of Russia itself. It used to, we've talked about this before on the show, it used to be a communist party, socialist, uber left-leaning country. And now it's not. Now it's embracing capitalism, wrestling with how to get it into place in a proper fashion, because the transition from extreme left to capitalism is a challenge. But I would submit to you that that's the reason the Democratic Party leadership isn't so excited about Russia, along with the fact that it helps them gin up whatever it is they're ginning up against Trump.
Well, and the one thing I would add to that, I do genuinely think that the left thought they had finally won over the country in the last 8 years.
Right.
And because previous to that, it was always kind of common wisdom that we were a center-right country. And I think because Obama got reelected in 2012, I think the left started drinking the Kool-Aid, thinking, you know what, we have moved the needle to the left.
Right.
And all that did was led the way to, and I'm a Trumper, okay?
Yeah.
But Obama laid the ground to bring in Trump. And I think that the left is having a hard time coming to reality that the needle did not move. We're still a center-right country.
You know that Reid genuinely didn't expect that rule change of his to ever have an opportunity to be used by a sitting Republican president. In terms of the Senate majority, went from supermajority down to simple for nominations. And
right.
that he never, ever dreamed that she would not win. But one of the differences you and I have, and listen, folks, Miles and I probably agree on all of the issues if you just do the litmus test. But where we disagree, and I think we profoundly disagree, is that I believe that if President Obama could constitutionally run again, he would have won. I believe that. And the difference is voter turnout. When I looked to Hillary's side, she was the weakest, worst, terriblest candidate the Democratic Party has put up in modern history, since the Civil War, in fact. I think she was an absolutely atrocious candidate. And when you look at voter turnout on the left side, I think it represents that. There's a lot of good Democrats that went, I don't like Trump, but I can't vote for her. And they went and voted for a third party, or they just stayed home and watched Captain Kangaroo or something. And I think that's why she lost, and I think that he's able to bring those groups around. I think he would have won.
Well, I would push back and say that I think that the country finally got tired. I don't think that they wanted to be referred to as racist, because remember, if
Sure.
you opposed Obama's policies in 2009, you were automatically a racist. You couldn't just oppose them on political means.
Right.
So I think we would have still had the closet Trumper.
Right.
You would have had everybody coming out of the voting booth saying, I love Obama, he's the best thing since sliced bread, everything's beautiful. But I still think you would have had the closet Trump effect. I still think some of the blue-collar folks still would have de-affected, because I think there was an element of fatigue that did overtake.
Well, we're down to the final seconds. One thing is certain, it would have been a clash of the titans. The two worlds would have come hard against each other. Folks, find us on Twitter at Talk Mike Hewitt and on Facebook. We'll see you next week.
Renegade River, guns and ammo, and so much more. Old-fashioned service with surprisingly low prices. On M104 at the top of the new 231 bypass in Utica. Or find us at renegaderiver.com, because you deserve it.